Welcome back. Today we will start adding some functionality. Now this is the GUI we built in the previous session, which I will run right now. So we have the basic structure of our menu bar, we have the main menus, and today we focus on the first function. So when we go to the file menu, we can start a new game. At the moment, nothing happens because we just link it to our do nothing dummy function. So hopefully by the end of this video, this new function will do something. It will start a new game. Well, not quite. It will take user input. So our focus will be on user input. So what I want to do is the following. When you go to the file menu and you click on new, a new window should appear. And this new window should allow you to enter your first and last name and select your gender. And then I want to have a start button that will close the window as well. So first I do a little bit of a tidy up. We already commented out some old code. I just get rid of that. At the moment, when you click on new, it's linked to our do nothing function. So that will be now updated. Okay, so now let's start working on this function. I call this the new game function. And I will now link it to my new command, and again notice there is no open close bracket here, so we are linking this. And so what does this new game do? It starts a new window. Now I will talk about scope a bit more in later videos because we will go through this a few times. So the idea of the global keyword is to indicate that this object here, this new game window object, should exist outside the scope of a function. So if I remove this statement in line 27, the new window, which is an instance of the top level class of Tkinter, would only exist inside the function. So that means if I want to work on this window, for instance, I want to close the window late in a different function, it wouldn't work because it only exists inside this function. So that will save us a bit of trouble later. So as before, we used the title method before. We have done that. In the main one, we have the families of Florence. So here we can have a different title, for instance, new game. And then we adjust the size. We have done this as well. We have talked about the geometry method. The icon bitmap, we haven't done this. So here you can just basically add an icon to it. Just to make it look a little bit nicer. I have a globe icon which you find on GitHub, but you can just put whatever you prefer. Good, so that should basically open up a window, but nothing else will happen. Let's see, let me save that and run it. So here we are. If I now click on new, it shows a new window, so that worked fine. And of course nothing else is there, but we have the title, we have this little icon which looks quite nice and fancy. So that's pretty good. And now the next step is to have entry widgets. So we will come across a new little feature in Tkinter where we can enter stuff, such as names and so on. And then we want to have also a button to select our gender, and then we need a start button. Okay, so now there is a lot of code happening here. I will talk about each and every element of it, but I don't want to type it out in front of you because that just, takes a lot of time. So let's just think about this for a minute. So there are a few elements that are a little bit, you have to get used to that. Again, you see I make statements about global variables because I want to use these variables later in other functions. So again, if I don't specify this as global, it only lives inside the function. You can always get stuff out of the function into other functions, having return values and stuff like that. But sometimes using global is more efficient. Yeah, again, it's debatable the various ways to do it. So here we have a first name, we have a last name, we have gender. And then you see here, this is a little bit not very Pythonian, I specify the type of my variable. Now that's a bit unusual maybe, so of course, if you do a bit of Python programming, you will know Python is dynamically typed. So that basically determines the type used for our input. Now, there are other ways to get user input which are not linked to Tkinter, and in general, when it comes to user input, it's actually always read as a string, and then you have to maybe move it into something else if you wish so. So here we have to specify we have a string variable, and now you see here a new class, the entry class, which lives on our new window, and then I can of course modify this. Of these different options you have to play around a little bit and see what works for you. So the width, for instance, for me 30 might work. And then I specify here that I have a text variable, so that's a string. It's a bit odd to say that. And this is fname, and fname is my string variable, which I then declare to be global, so I can use it outside this function. And then, which we already discussed before, I use the grid method. So we spoke about pack and grid on Tkinter. So this is basically about where I place it. So it's in row 0, column 1. Again, these numbers are relative, yeah, so they're not absolute, doesn't matter. Then you might move things a little bit. So pad X, you have to play around and see how that looks like. And we do something similar for the last name, but here we move it to the next row, same column. And again, we link it to our global variable. And then we use labels. We already saw labels in action before, and here we just simply name stuff. Yeah, so first name, last name, so that you basically know what's going on. And we put this in the column before the entry. Yeah, you will see that in a minute. So that should take care of our entries. And then we have a radio button. That's something new. You haven't seen that before. Okay, so we have radio buttons here. So that's our gender variable, which again we specify as global, which is an int var, so that's an integer, and we set this equal to 1. So by default we set this as equal to 1. And then of course, what is 1, what is 0? These are the options you specify here. So that's a list, and in the list you have tuples. You have the male tuple, which refers to the 0, and you have a female tuple, which refers to the 1. So it's just a matter of where you want to start this radio button. You will see this in a minute. And then you run through a for loop. So for option in these options, you then have a text displayed, which is option 0, so this is male or female, and then you have a variable linked, which is our gender variable, and you have the value option. Yeah, so the value is option 1, so that's the second entry of the respective tuple. So again, it's a list of tuples. And the nice thing about this is inside the loop I can also make the grid quite efficient, because I can do it relative to my option value. Yeah, so put differently, also I can always add more items to that list. It would then adjusted accordingly. And here you see the int function, so this converts this into an integer, which is what you need, because here you see that's a string. So to make sure that this actually is an integer. And then you are in row 2, which works because here we are row 1 before or row 3, so depending on which option you select. And then finally we have the great start button. You see that here. So that we might just comment this out for a second, because I then have to add a new function. I might just do this in a minute, a little bit later. Let me just run this one more time. Most often I forget stuff, so let's see what happens. So here we are. I now press new, and here we are. So you see now you have these entry widgets, first name, last name, and here the radio button. So you can be male, female, that's it. And later we need a start button down there. So here we could start entering stuff like, I don't know, Amy Smith, if I can spell it. And then we need the start button to actually take these values. Yeah, so that's basically it. Let's comment this in. Now you see, of course, our start button function, which is not defined here. So I have to define this as well. And you see quickly more and more stuff is added. And otherwise the button is just like any other button. I call this start. I link it to this command. Again, I use the grid method. I mess about a little bit with the options just to see how this looks like. The column span is again just a cosmetic thing, yeah, just to make sure it is kind of placed across these columns. It looks reasonably fine. Good. So what I do is I now get the input from the user. So you see here this get method. Yeah. So that's the way to do it. And you see I refer to fname. I can only do this because I declared fname and lname and also gender as global. Otherwise they only live inside the new game function. Yeah, so that's important, it wouldn't work. Or I have to pass it. That also works, yeah, you have to see, sometimes it can be messy, so doing this as global makes sense because we will use it across the board. So basically this line here obtains user input. Yeah, the same applies to the next line and also line 33. And then after, so I press it, so once I press, I also close this new game window. Again, you see I refer to new game window, which is global. So I can do this and I can destroy it in this function, otherwise it wouldn't work. I just use this to print it to the terminal just to check whether user input is actually taken. So this is a formatted string. You see the F in front. I spoke about this in many other videos. And in these wavy brackets, I refer to these variables. Yeah, so this variable here, so the fname get and the lname get and the gender get. So basically I just make sure that the input I put in is recognized and we can work with it. Good, I save all of that. Let's run it. Okay, here we are, new. Let's put in Amy Smith. And now you see the start button. It goes across two columns. So this is the column span, which is quite nice. And I press it and you see Amy Smith is a 1. Yeah, of course 1 is our option 1, which refers to female. So that's pretty good. So now we have it and it seems to work just fine. I see you in the next session.